Hello and welcome, everyone. We have just going to give a moment here for the system to make sure everybody's lined up and listening. We've got it. Our system is showing us numbers coming on. I suspect we will have a few more people joining us as we get started. And anyway, I'm going to get us going in any case. Welcome to our webinar, Building Individual Resilience, Self-Care. I just am getting a note that I'm getting a slow system, so hopefully I'm coming through okay. Self-care, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and more. My name's Becky Dale. I am the interim CEO at Minnesota Communities Caring for Children and Prevent Child Abuse Minnesota. And Chris, if you would like to introduce yourself briefly, we'll start in.
Sure, I'm Chris Pomeranke, and I'm the interim associate director right now at Minnesota Communities Caring for Children.
And I am just making some adjustments here so that hopefully I don't have technical difficulties. Alrighty. So we will start in. I'm going to just see if this is working here. All right, it looks like we've got the right stuff on the screen. Today, Barb Sorum, who is our Southern Minnesota Director of Prevention Initiatives, is also assisting, and so she's the one out there in the world who's going to let me know if for some reason you aren't seeing or hearing things well. Hopefully she can keep us posted to that. And also how you guys are responding. So I'd like to introduce this by saying today is going to be an interactive webinar. We really do what we can to make webinars as lively as possible. They have its limitations, and it can be easy to get distracted while you're participating in a webinar and not get as much out of it as you might in an in-person workshop. And there's some things we can do to mitigate that, to make it more engaging and get closer to the kind of responses and learning you might get in an in-person place. So part of the learning is to be interactive. We really believe that we as adults learn best with each other in a co-learning kind of environment, so we'd really like to invite your participation. Right now you're all in listen-only mode, but you do have a feature on your webinar screen that is a little hand that you can raise. So right now, I'd just like everyone to practice raising your hand. So if you would click the raised hand button, and then Barb, can you let me know if you're seeing hands go up, just to make sure that's working.
Yes, I have to take myself off mute. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm seeing lots of hands go up. It's working.
Great. Thank you all so much for that. So now, Barb, if you would lower the hands, and then let everybody know that if you want to say something, click the hand button. We would love to hear from you. So Barb will lower the hands, and then if you're willing to just test to make sure we can hear everyone, if you're willing to just say hello, maybe introduce yourself, we'd like to hear from a couple people to make sure that that part is working. So if you could raise your hand if you're willing to say hello, tell us your name, where you're from, we'll test that part of it a little bit. And so Barb, if you see a hand, if you would pick somebody and call on them to just test it.
Okay, here we go. Looks like Mickey. I unmuted you.
Can you say again who you unmuted, Barb?
Mickey.
Mickey.
Yep.
Mickey, would you say hello?
Yep.
Let us know.
I heard her.
You did.
Say it again, Mickey.
Hi, this is Mickey Maresca from the Department of Human Services. Hi, Becky. Hi, Chris.
Great.
Hey, Mickey, it's very faint. Barb, can you hear pretty clearly?
I could hear her a little bit, but if you had a microphone, Mickey, that would help.
You know what? I wasn't using my microphone.
Hey, now we can hear you. Great.
Sorry. It was up on my ear. Okay. Hi, I'm Mickey Maruska from the Department of Human Services.
Nice to
All
hear
right.
you, Mickey. Glad you're here. Welcome.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you for helping us with that test.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to
Okay, so
mute
the
you
next
again.
thing,
Oh.
go ahead.
Well, there was one more. Leah?
Okay, great. Love to hear from someone else.
Leah, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Leah Windsor from Polk County Public Health.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks and welcome. So the next thing I'd like to test right quick in terms of our interaction is the questions box. And so you should all have a place where you can type in questions, and Barb's going to keep an eye on those and let us know when questions come in. But for now, just to test it, what I'd like you to do is each of you reflect for a moment on how you came into today, how you started the day, how you prepared for the day, and how you would rate your own wellness today. So if you think about the self-care things that help you be at your best in any given day, if you would just rate on a scale of 1 to 7 how you feel you have your wellness today, which includes your self-care and what you've done to come to the day. So if you would just put in the text box and then number 1 to 7, or in the question box, a number 1 to 7 of how you would rate your wellness today, right now in this very moment, because it changes moment to moment.
Can you see their responses, Becky, or do you want me to give them to you?
If you would give me a sense, I could if I wanted to, but I'm trying to
Absolutely.
keep myself focused on
Yes.
presenting, which makes it harder to watch. So if you could give me a sense, that'd be great.
So we have 7, 5, 4, 5, 5, 9, 4, 5, 4.
9. That one caught my interest. On a scale of 1 to 7, somebody rated their wellness as a 9. Whoever you are, if you would just say a little something in the text box about what is it that allows you to be at a 9 on a scale of 7 in wellness today, because we can all learn from that. And Barb can keep an eye on that and let us know. So thank you all for testing that. I'm going to keep moving because we have a lot that we'd like to cover today. I just want to mention that if it's possible for you to be in a quiet place, that would be most helpful. Some of the exercise that we're going to ask you to do, it would be helpful to be in a quiet place. And also if you can have the ability to move a little bit. A lot of our wellness is connected to our physical selves, and so we'll be experimenting with that some today. So if you're in a place where you can move, that would be most helpful. And then we're going to spend a little time at the beginning just reviewing what we've done. A lot of, and many of you have probably been exposed to already, reviewing the impact of trauma on the brain. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of wellness on the brain. And then we're going to look at some exercises. We're going to spend a lot of time on exercises for building individual resilience. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of them, so we may not get to all of them in terms of actually practicing them. We'll get to the ones we get to, and we'll keep an eye on time, and in the last section try to just review the ones that we don't actually get to try today, so that you have many things that you can draw from. And again, I want to say I welcome your participation and thoughts and comments. If you have something you want to add at any point, please raise your hand. And Barb will keep an eye on that. And Barb, I just want to check in to see if there's anything more from the text boxes before we go on.
Our 9 decided maybe she should go down to a 6 after rethinking.
She was thinking a scale of 1 to 10. I threw a wrench in the...
And Tammy said, I began the day wanting to stay in bed after the nice long weekend. But she's at a 7.
Good. Good. All right. So I think we will just jump in, and I just want to also acknowledge that I think probably I speak for Chris too, and you can nod or shake or join in if you disagree. But I mean, we are very much on this journey ourselves, and on an ongoing learning process about being aware of our own wellness moment to moment and knowing how to make adjustments and when we need to make adjustments. And so we're learning, and we're sharing some of what we're learning and practicing, and also looking forward to hearing and learning from you all as well. All right, so I'm going to move us on to the next slide, hopefully. And I realize that, hang on a second. Okay. I just hit it. So it helps me a little bit to be able to remember to look at the camera. So just Chris, where the light is where the camera is too, since we're presenting from the same computer. But I'll trust Barb to let me know if we need to do something different to be able to be seen well. All right, so understanding our brain. I'm just going to review a few key elements of brain science and brain development that I think will sort of set the groundwork for what we're going to talk about today. Again, I imagine a lot of you know these already. But a key piece is our brain adapts to our environment. That happens throughout our lives. As we know, there's a lot of brain development that happens in the early years, and so what our environment was in the early years and how we adapted to it really has an impact lifelong. And the environment that we can, as we move through different environments in our lives, that we continue to adapt to that through plasticity, through the ever-shifting adaptations that are happening in our brain and our bodies and our nervous system entirely. Our brain is interactive, so the people that we interact with, and animals and world that we interact with, how we interact with our whole environment, is a big piece of how our brain develops and continues to develop. So when in early childhood we talk about this process of serve and return, how children reach out to adults naturally and adults respond, and in that interaction our brain develops and particular pathways are wired and reinforced. And that's true ongoing too. So how we interact with one another impacts our brain. So when neuroscientists talk about our brain, they always say our brain. They don't say my brain and your brain. They say our brain, because it is a very interactive thing. So for me, a big piece of my learning is understanding that we exist in relationship, and that this idea of individuality, which has been so primary really in this country and how we think of ourselves, is not complete. That we are, yeah, there's an element of our experience and existence that's individual, but we are very much interrelated and impacting one another, and we're literally wired into each other's biology in ways that mean our brain is an accurate way to talk about our reality and our experience. Another key point is that it takes a lot of energy to build a new pathway. So whenever we're learning something new, it can be frustrating and difficult, and children experience that when a 2.5-year-old is having a meltdown. Probably they can see the next skill, but they can't quite do it, and that is really, really frustrating because it takes a lot of energy. And that's important, I think, for us as adults to acknowledge and be aware of as we are working to build new pathways as well in our own experience. So when we're trying to build a new habit, it can be challenging. It can take time. It can take effort. And so for me, knowing that means that I can remind myself to be less discouraged when I fail, to take failure as part of the process and not as a reason to give up, because I know that it takes a lot of energy. And I know one thing I don't have here on this key points that I want to say is that repetition, the more we repeat something, the more automatic it becomes. So that's part of this last point, that our brain conserves energy by wiring automatic responses. So whatever we repeat, our brain says, right, it takes a lot of energy to build a new pathway. I'm going to remember that this is one that gets used a lot, and I'm going to make it easy and quick and easy to do. So when I'm frustrated trying to learn a new skill, if I can remember that I just need to keep repeating it, it will get easier. It will get easier. And that's really key, I think, in terms of creating wellness habits, that some of them are hard, and that if we simply remember that by repeating them they will get easier, we will begin to be able to step from that 2.5-year-old place of being able to see the next skill but not quite do it into being able to do it. And not only do it, but then eventually do it with fluidity and ease. So that's the sort of summary of brain science that I want to start with. And then I'm going to look about what that means for trauma. So we are wired for fear and survival, which is a good thing. Our brain protects us. That's one of its really primary functions. And so we know about fight, flight, and freeze, and I haven't quite added to my slide what I need to. The fourth one that they talk about now is faint also. So fight, flight, freeze, and faint. So our brain says, when in danger, if you can, you can fight to protect yourself. If you can't, get out of there as fast as possible. If you don't think fighting or fleeing is going to help, then freeze and hope you're not noticed. And I like to talk about this in terms of if you're encountering a lion or a tiger on the plains, these are the things that will serve you. And if you can't fight, flee, or freeze, then the faint one, if you're being attacked by a tiger, means you won't, your nervous system shuts down so that you don't feel the pain of what's about to come. Now that all serves us really well when we're in physical danger. It's less useful when we're having emotional challenges and interacting with situations that we're not actually in physical danger. The other pieces that help to protect us in those moments are cortisol and adrenaline are released to increase our strength, our stamina, our speed, our reaction time, and focus. And I was about to say unfortunately, but depends on your circumstance, and they decrease your thinking capacity. So again, that's useful if you are in a life or death situation. You don't want to think about it, you want to act quickly to protect yourself. Now, unfortunately, the unfortunate part of it is many of the challenges that we face in the modern world are not life or death situations, and they're things that we need our thinking capacity for. So that protective feature of our brain can get in the way of our ability to think, to be creative, to connect to intuition and body knowledge. And so some of the things we want to practice help us access those wellness things that maybe serve us better in some of the kinds of challenges that we face in modern day society. When we're, and the last point, when we're exposed to repeated trauma, our brain becomes really, really good at protecting us. It becomes hypervigilant and quick to respond to perceived danger. So when in our work around caring for children, when children are exposed to repeated danger, and sometimes that, life or death situations even, really young, again, their system, their brain and all the systems it's connected to get really good at looking out for danger and expecting danger at any turn, because that's what got repeated. That was what life was like. And cortisol and adrenaline get raised to more of a consistent level. And our bodies are set for cortisol and adrenaline to be released for about a 20-minute period and then reduce. But when our levels get higher, then we get persistent anxiety, persistent stress, and those are kind of the responses our brain has. Now, we try not to say these are good or bad. They're adaptations that either work or don't in given environments. So knowing and being aware of what are our adaptations, how is our brain adapted to protect us, and does that really help protect us in the environment we're in now? And if not, what do we want to practice? What do we want to start repeating that will serve us better, serve our wellness better now in the current environment? So that's the sort of background. I'm going to take a little breath and check in with Barb to see if anybody at this point has if there are any questions in the question box, if there are any raised hands, anybody wants to mention anything at this point.
Nope, I don't have any questions, and please throughout the presentation feel free to put in the questions and we'll ask them to presenters during the pauses.
Or raise a hand,
yes,
or whatever.
Yep, don't have any yet. So thank you, Becky.
So I'll just give you a quick picture of the brain before I turn it over to Chris. But when I talked about the lower part of the brain, and I think you can see my image too, but we can use the handy model of the brain now too, the brain stem, the hippocampus and the amygdala, the midbrain that monitors the sort of danger and lets us know whether we should be on alert or not. And then the upstairs brain, as Dan Siegel calls it, the neocortex, the higher function, mental functionings. We need all of those parts. And when what Dan Siegel talks about, when we have that adrenaline and cortisol release, we can flip our lid. The upper brain disengages because of the cortisol and adrenaline, and we want to be able to learn to bring it back online and to give the midbrain a hug, is one of the ways he puts it. But this is just a little thinking about the parts of the brain. And one of the things we'll be talking about are what are ways we can calm our amygdala and hippocampus and re-access our thinking, our creativity, our intuition to serve us. All right. So Chris, I can either stay here and do this here. There, I think I will engage.
All right. So we just heard a lot about what happens in our brains when we have a stress response.
Chris,
And
Chris, can you lower? I can't see your face.
Oh, so here. Yes.
There we go. Much better. Thank you.
okay.
Taller than me.
Yeah, I can't see the screen right now. So, all right. So we know what happens in our brains. We just heard about that from Becky. And what happens in our brains gets sent out to the rest of our body. So we have a parasympathetic nervous system and a sympathetic nervous system. And when we're under stress, the sympathetic nervous system reacts in a way that's helpful to us when we're in danger. As Becky mentioned, we fight, flight, freeze, or faint. And a lot of things happen throughout our bodies, which are good if we're in danger, but not so great long term. So in general, our bodies constrict in a lot of different ways. And so we have our hearts beat faster, our breathing is quicker and more shallow, and so we're not getting as much oxygen in our lungs and then throughout our body where we need it for good blood flow. And that is okay when we're in danger, and it's okay short term, but long term it can cause a lot of problems. So ideally, we want the parasympathetic nervous system to take over and help us rest and digest after we've had a stress reaction. So I think we want to move on to the next slide. Could you do that, please? All right. So some of the techniques that we can use to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system are listed below. There are many others, and if we have time, we'll brainstorm on some of those later. But stress is not always negative. For example, physical exercise causes stress, and we'll talk more about that later too. But physical stress is an example of stress that our bodies need. And the problem is when stress becomes chronic and we can't turn it off. And then that, as I said, creates problems long term. Next slide, please. So wellness impacts many parts of who we are. And so when we think in terms of wellness, a lot of times people think about physical and sometimes emotional health, but there are other types of wellness too that make up who we are. There's intellectual, interpersonal, the relationships that we have with one another, our spiritual wellness, and environmental wellness, the environment that we live in, and how that impacts how well we are. Another thing to think about is that there is a difference between health and wellness. So, for example, you can have really poor physical health sometimes and then be well in all of the other areas in your life. And so I just want to make that distinction early about wellness is something that you can control in spite of what your physical or emotional health is where it is at. And so there are different techniques then that we can use and things that we should pay attention to improve wellness even if our health isn't great or even if it is. So some positive kinds of stress management strategies are listed below. Exercise, nutrition, sleep. I won't read the whole list. The things that we're going to focus on today, though, are breathing techniques. So quieting the body. When you breathe, it relaxes your body. When you breathe deeply and are taking in a lot of oxygen, it helps you to slow down all of the systems in your body so that you don't have that quick and shallow breathing that can lead to higher anxiety. Meditation, so quieting your mind and to help slow some of the racing thoughts that you can get when you are under stress. And then physical movement, as I mentioned before, is another way to raise a stress response in a different way, and then when you end the exercise, your body automatically goes into a parasympathetic response system, and has the rest and relaxation that's needed after you create a little bit of stress by exercising. And so these three things, breathing, meditation, and physical movement, when you practice any of those things, they're good for you in the moment, but they also have lasting effects long after you stop doing them. And so, for example, if you exercise regularly, it helps you later if you have a stress response about something else. It helps moderate those kinds of stress responses throughout your day if you, for example, start the day by exercising. So physical activity acts as a moderator to stress. It improves brain function and learning, and along with that, there are also risks that go along with being sedentary. So, for example, there was just some research that came out this year about individuals who sit at a desk all day. And what it found was that people who sit at a desk 8 or more hours a day have a higher risk of a lot of different kinds of diseases, and have a shorter lifespan. And that's true even if people sit all day and then go exercise at night. It's not enough just to do that. And what they found was that if you have to sit at a desk all day, it really makes a difference if you can get up and move, even for a few minutes, at regular intervals throughout the day. It makes a difference if you get up and move. And so it's another good reason and an easier way sometimes, because it doesn't have to be that long. Sometimes it can be a couple of minutes of getting up and moving. It's an easy way to fit some physical activity into your life without taking a half an hour or even 15 minutes to do it. Along with that, behavior change can be difficult, and there's often an impulse to try to make too many changes at one time. And so today I would like everyone to think about just focusing on one thing out of all of the things that we talked about today that you think would help you live a healthier and happier life. If you make that one thing part of your daily routine, it is more likely that it can become a habit. And research shows that after 21 days of repeated behavior, it's even more likely to become a habit. And so our challenge to you today, as we go through all of the different techniques that we'll be talking about, is to think about, of all of the things that we discussed, what one thing you think you might want to try to incorporate into your routine that would help with your health and your wellness. In addition to all of the things listed on the slide, physical movement also improves self-esteem, motivation, self-confidence. It improves learning, your attention span, cognition. It decreases depression and anxiety. It improves muscular relaxation and health, and it can prevent and reverse the damage caused by chronic stress. So there's all kinds of good reasons to do physical activity. And we'll be doing a little bit more brainstorming about that later, because it doesn't require a lot of time always. It doesn't require a gym membership or any fancy equipment. And we will brainstorm on some of those things that we can do later. Next slide. Okay, great.
All right, so I'm going to adjust this, and Barb can tell me if it needs further adjustment. I think it's probably okay. So, freedom is the ability to pause between stimulus and response, and in the pause, to choose. So I want to just take a moment now, and Chris talked about breathing, and I don't have it in here, but it made me think there's a great video on YouTube of, I think it's Elmo, and a song about belly breathing. And I just saw one yesterday that I haven't had a chance to read about starting to teach children of this concept of breathing. So just for a moment, wherever you are, if you could get into a comfortable position and focus on bringing breath in way deep down into your belly. And while you're doing that, if you could just notice, maybe notice whatever's present. What do you have? What are emotions that are present for you right now? And I'm wondering if either in the text box or by raising your hand, anyone would like to share what you notice when you just take a moment to pause right now, breathe into your belly, and see what you notice. And Barb, if you would just chime in if anyone adds anything, and maybe everybody's enjoying the pause and taking a moment, and that's fine too. We don't allow much space in our daily lives.
I think it does just take a minute to sit there and be that. I felt my brain kind of stimulated. Some of the messages here, I noticed my heart beating. She notices calm, definite slowing down, an increased awareness of being, more relaxed. My chair is more comfortable than I am aware of most of the time.
Oh, yeah, huh? Noticing a comfort that you have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing that even in doing this webinar, I can get speeded up. The urgency, you feel like there's so much I want to share and talk about. We all have challenges in our lives, and a particular challenge I've been dealing with over the last several months. I realized last weekend that this very basic thing of paying attention to breathing deep into my belly, I have not been remembering to do in that context. Even though I know how much shifting my breathing can shift the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, and how important that is, and how so I've always thought, I thought often, is how can we get more people in the world knowing and doing this, and how can we boil it down to something simple, because it's complicated. But the simplest piece that I think we could encourage everybody to try is pausing more often. And self-awareness is the first step in being able to create a pause. Noticing when we need it. Well, this thing about practice is practicing it when we don't think we need it. So just stopping more often to pause and giving yourself some reminders to pause even when you think you don't need it. So you can notice, okay, I'm moving kind of fast in this webinar. It might not hurt to slow down a little bit. And then pausing creates the space to be able to self-manage and to be able to choose how we respond. So our brain has wired a lot of automatic responses, and some of them serve us and some of them don't. And so we're often, a trigger will happen and we react. We trigger and react. And practicing pausing allows us to stop and say, okay, is my automatic habit what will be best in this situation or get me to an outcome I want? Or can I experiment with some other response that might actually get me to the outcome that I want? So this is just a brief look at emotional intelligence as a tool, and self-awareness is the first step. Being aware that noticing that I'm feeling stressed. So, for example, in my day today, when I first started out rating my wellness, I probably would have said about a 5 of 7. And part of that is I've got a lot on my plate right now, and I'm juggling it and noticing and knowing when I'm feeling anxious about that, and actually making the choice, despite this really strong habit of feeling like I should just keep doing rather than pause, even though I'm busy, and make a choice. And this morning I made the choice to ride my bike into work, which now, hearing Chris's part of it, I'm thinking, okay, that makes a difference. That helps. I did the physical activity to help me. I took a little bit extra time, quicker to drive the car, but that little extra time will make it possible for me to do this busy day in a better way. from a better place. So so when you're aware that you're feeling anxious and pause, then you can choose, okay, my automatic response would have been to drive because I got a lot to do and I need that extra 15 minutes, right? But the choice to bike instead is a self-management choice that says, okay, I'm going to take 15 extra minutes and know that's going to pay off in major ways throughout the day. And those are the ones we're going to focus on today. In the emotional intelligence framework, when we are self-aware and self-managed, we're more able to be aware of others then and notice when they may be having an automatic response that isn't serving them, and then have greater relationship skills and being able to navigate those times. I just want to point out in the self-management point, too, that the thing that's really motivating for me is the line that says harnessing intuition and creativity. That I know that when I have access to intuition and creativity, I make choices that feel that are better, I think. So I really want that, so that motivates me to practice this more and get better at it. So I want to tell you a couple of tools, and we'll try one that have to do with these. And you can maybe decide, we'll give a couple minutes, and you can decide which one of these tools you want to try in this time, and then I'd like to hear what you hear. So one tool is the Notice and Ease tool, and we did that a little bit. You just take a minute, you focus your breathing, and this one comes from heartmath.com, where they have lots of other tools that you could look up. We've tried to include some resources here that you can follow up on later. So just to notice and admit what you're feeling, try to name it, and then as you focus on your heart and breathe, tell yourself to ease. And it's not forcing the feeling out, it's just noticing it and easing it. And one way you can use this tool is to practice it for 1 minute several times a day, just stopping, focusing on your heart and breathing as if you're breathing in through your heart and down into your belly, and noticing what you're feeling, and then just letting it ease. Another self-management tool, and I put Amy Cuddy's name in here. If you put her name into YouTube, she has a whole bunch of great YouTubes about this particular one, is around power poses. And she's done some really fascinating research that essentially shows that when we are feeling strong and powerful, we spread out. Like if you think of somebody winning a race, they're often going to have their hands out wide and be looking, their gaze looking up, and have their whole body spread out. Or if you imagine a person in a power position, they're going to have like Wonder Woman pose is one of the poses she talks about too. What her research shows is that when you're feeling powerful, you naturally do those things. But interestingly, when you do those things, it can also stimulate in your body the same sense. And there's similar research around smiling, and smiling in the way that you makes your eyes sort of squint a little bit, and that when you're happy you smile, but if someone is instructed to do with their face the things you do naturally when you're happy, then they start to feel happy too. So what her research found was that if you stand in one of these poses for 2 minutes, that it will increase your, I have an error in the PowerPoint, so I'll fix it before we send it to you, which we will. Make sure you guys all get a copy of the PowerPoint. It actually increases testosterone, not adrenaline, which is the hormone that helps us feel a sense of power, and it reduces our cortisol. And that makes us feel calm and confident. So it actually has this physiological response. So I'm going to ask you all to get, I'm going to time it for 2 minutes. It may seem like a long time to be quiet, but I'm going to ask you to choose one of these and try it. And see if you notice. I noticed when Chris is going to be talking about yoga later too, but I noticed there are some yoga poses, some of the, that when I learned this piece from Amy Cuddy, I'm like, oh, that's why I feel so awesome in my yoga class when we get to the strengths poses, because they are strong and spread out. So, all right, so find, if you're in a place that you can, get into a position where you can either focus on your breathing for a moment and note, or try one of these. I've talked through them all, so you know what they are. They're on the screen. 2 minutes starting now. Try one of them. Oh, sorry, and I will say for the power poses, this is a good one, the sort of X, get your body into an X, or with your hands on your hips in the Wonder Woman pose. Those are ones we'll try today. If you look up Amy Cuddy, she'll give you some other suggestions. Okay, so you take a minute and if you have, or raise a hand if you'd like to share a response. One thing that I noticed was the overachiever in me wanted to try to do both at once, and then I remember what Chris reminded us at the beginning, that maybe practicing one thing at a time tends to be more successful in terms of habit change and behavior change. But these are both things that could, 2 minutes a few times a day, if you practice one or the other of them for 21 days, I bet you'd start to find that you notice more often when you're feeling anxiety or when you're feeling stress, and that noticing that will remind you to practice the tool, and it could be an easy adjustment throughout the day. Barb, seeing anything anybody wants to chime in with or respond?
Not seeing anything yet, but while we're waiting, I like the Wonder Woman pose. And I found that the longer I did it, the more puffed out my chest got, and I raised my chin a little higher. So I was thinking, how perfect is something like that when you're getting ready to maybe go in for an interview, or perfect to do something like that.
One of the things they tested was in job interviewing, how much a difference that 2 minutes can make. And then I told somebody about it who actually tried it before a job interview recently and got the job. So there you go.
Oh.
All right. So I think I'm ready to hand over to you, Chris.
And so we're going to move the camera up so that I can make sure people can see me.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to try to do some yoga.
It's hard to hear her. I'm not.
Oh, sorry. I'm getting closer. We're just trying to get the logistics worked out here.
So okay. Also, Chris can see herself.
Okay. Well, while you're getting ready, we have a question. So, Barb, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead, Barb. Barb, you had your hand up? Oh, and if you're talking, I can't hear you. Okay. Barb, I muted you again. Maybe you can try typing something into the chat box. Okay, Chris.
Did she say okay? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I'm sorry. Okay. So I think everybody can see me well enough. We're going to try a little bit of a couple of yoga things that you can stop and do throughout the day. I'm standing. You can either stand for this, but I really chose things that you could do sitting too. So whatever your preference is, find a place in the room that you can move the same length of space that your arm span is, or you can just stay in your chair, like I said. And there's just some simple things that you can do throughout the day to get just a little bit of movement and blood flow going. And there's all kinds of exercises you can do, but I specifically chose yoga because yoga is about quieting your mind, and it's about doing some movement, and it's also about paying attention to your breathing. So it's doing all kinds of things that are helpful for that parasympathetic nervous system reaction that we're hoping for after we have had a stress response. So, so if everybody is ready, I'm going to start with something called sun breaths. And this is just a real simple variation. For those of you that have taken yoga before, it's a simple variation of a sun salutation. And so if you want to start with your hands at your chest, with your thumbs right at chest level, and we're just going to slowly, and as we move our arms, we're going to inhale, and as we move them back, we're going to exhale. And so we're just going to do some real simple opening of our arms as wide as we can, and pausing, and then bringing them back to center, and pausing. And let's just do 3 of those and really focus as we're doing that on our breath, on the movement that keep our minds focused on the movement that we're doing, and really try to open our chests up when we move our arms. So I'm going to do 3. You can do them at your own speed, starting now. Okay, so when we're sitting at our desks all day, if some of you are doing that like I am, we tend to lean forward, hunched sort of over our computer, our keyboards, and stay in that hunched position all day long. So anything that we can do to stop once in a while and open that up is really good for really every area in our upper body, but in particular opening up your chest and improving your posture. The next thing that I would like to try, and this works the same area that we were just talking about, are some neck rolls. So we're just going to really slowly, and I'll go through one series first, and then we'll do a few of them on our own. But we just want to start with a bowed head and roll very slowly to our left, or it's my right, but you're probably left to you, and to the left, and then back to center. So, and you can do these with your eyes open, or you can do them with your eyes closed if it's easier for you to focus on breathing while you're doing it and quieting your mind. So let's begin with 3 of those, 1 on each side. Okay. Next, we're going to do something called shoulder circles. So you can do that one of two ways. You can keep your hands at your side to do those, or you can put your hands on your shoulders. It's really just a personal preference. There aren't any benefits to either. It's whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead and put my hands on my shoulders, and what we're going to do is a series of 3 one-way, so rolling back 3 times, and then a series of 3 rolling forward, and then we're going to do that 3 times. So starting rolling behind, and then switching to 3 ahead, or forward, and then 2 more of those each direction. Okay, the next 2 are going to be a little trickier, so I'm going to see if I can get, you don't need to see my head for this one. So what we're going to do, you will have to stand up for this one, is we're just going to do some really gentle bending. This is called chair. And what you want to do is put your arms out in front of you and just slightly bend your knees and bend, and you don't need to force this, but bend like you're going to sit down in a chair and then stand again. And it doesn't have to be a big movement. This isn't aerobics class. We're just doing some gentle warming up of the muscles. And let's go ahead and do 3 of those. And you want to remember when you're doing this to breathe, using your belly. Breathe from your belly. Okay. Now the next one, last one is called cat-cow, and there's all different ways you can do this. You can do it on your hands and knees, you can do it in a chair, and you can do it standing. I'm going to try to do this standing, and hopefully you'll be able to see the movement, because this one is pretty slight too. But it's a good way to move your spine, because as I mentioned, we're hunched over a lot of the day, and this is a good way to get some movement in there and, again, get some blood flowing. So if you're sitting in a chair, just sit with a straight posture. If you're standing, we're going to start by doing the cat part of this, which is very slightly arching your back. And then the cow position is arching the opposite direction. So you're doing I'm kind of over-exaggerating the movement because it doesn't have to be, I want to be able to show you the motion, but we're arching our backs outward and then arching inward. So let's go ahead and do 3 of those. Okay, that's good. So all of this gets you moving just a little bit so that you can get some of the benefits that we've talked about. I've also included, a I included a link to a website called Do Yoga With Me, and it's excellent. They have every level of yoga, different kinds of programs that you can follow. You can pick the amount of time that you want to do it in. I have found that when I get up right away in the morning, depending on what I have to do that day, if I take 5 minutes, anywhere up to 15 minutes to do some of this stretching when I get up, it really makes a difference throughout my day. And so, and it's an easy way, like we just did, to incorporate it into different parts of your day. I actually have a reminder on my computer. It's a gong sound that goes off when to remind me to stop and do that throughout the day. And then I'll send this in the version that we send out to you, but there's also another practice called Qigong, and it's similar to yoga in that it's simple flowing movements with a focus on mindfulness and breath. And there's some good websites that you can go to for that as well, and we'll include that in the version that we send out to you. Thanks.
Okay. So I should adjust here. Hopefully this is pretty good. So as I was listening to Chris, a typical thought came up in my head that comes up in my head often about worrying what you all are thinking out there and hoping this is going over okay. And the one thing I often worry about in these kinds of things is we did try to get some real content in the beginning and of the science underneath this, but there's always this thought, well, this is this is so simple. These are just little things. These are common sense. And I want to just speak to that for a moment because in our work around preventing child abuse and neglect, and we're thinking about difficult problems and entrenched trauma, and how do we care for children in ways that interrupt trauma and help us build wellness. There are so many things that are simple and yet difficult. And so I just want to reflect back a moment to this concept of what gets repeated we get good at, and how our brain wires the things that get repeated, because building new habits can be difficult. And one thing I often talk about and think about is how for ever, generations probably, we've talked about parents when a parent feels upset to stop and count to 10. Common. Everybody thinks about it. Everybody knows that. And yet, it's not enough somehow. And my theory is that we tell parents when you're upset you should count to 10, but what we don't say is practice it. And so when you're upset, what you have done repeatedly, all of those parts of our brain that want to protect us kick in full gear, and we move right into fight, flight, freeze, or faint without stopping to count to 10. And the reason we don't stop and count to 10 is not that we don't know to do it, it's that we haven't practiced it. So I just want to acknowledge here that a lot of these things that we're talking about may seem like common sense, but what we don't do, the missing piece, I think, is we don't actually stop during the day and take time to practice and do them. And so I'm really encouraging you to do that, to make that leap. As we're talking, as Chris said, pick one thing. It could be one of these things we're doing today. It could be something that you bring to it yourself, to choose to practice. So I just sort of wanted to interject that at this point, and also stop a moment to see if there are any other comments or experiences. And we're actually asking you to stop and do these things now as we go through this, because the actual doing of them helps us feel what their impact can be and start practicing it, and then maybe see, okay, I've tried a bunch of things, which one really connected for me and which one do I want to try. So any responses at this point? Anybody want to chime in and say anything? You have questions that might shift how we spend. We have about a half hour left. We've been going for 2/3 of the way in here, so I want to make sure that we don't leave till the very end the opportunity for feedback and conversation.
Again, while we're waiting for any comments, A lot of cracking going on when I started moving my shoulders. So it's a really good
I
reminder
have
for
that too.
me that I need to move when I'm sitting here.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge that, bigger things like, committing larger to a larger practice of something is a great thing too. And it's amazing how just these several small pauses through the day, what a big impact that can have. The adjustments throughout the day.
I think everyone is just intent on listening right now, so.
Okay, well, please, 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 it really helps us to know you're out there and to know this is landing or not, so we can adjust. I mean, I can only I think I'll make a comment on our interactedness. I can be certainly self-aware, but I can't be aware of what's going on for you. So if there's something we can do to improve your experience, please let us know. So, Hardwiring Happiness. Now, this resource comes from a book actually called Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hansen. And it relies on a piece of science about how we understand that our brain is sticky for the negative and Teflon for the positive. And that's part of how we protect ourselves. I've heard some researchers talk about how for people to generally feel like life is going pretty well, they need a 3-to-1 ratio of positive things happening over the course of the day versus negative. And that's when we feel like life's pretty good. In our marriages, I've heard a 5-to-1 ratio, that 5 positive interactions to 1 negative is when you feel like your marriage is in a pretty good place. So, so that's how we protect ourselves, right? By our brain really, even if we haven't been exposed to a lot of trauma, our brain really being on the lookout for what might be dangerous. And so that's why it's sticky for the negative. We're predisposed to protect ourselves that way. And wow, 3-to-1. I mean, even if you've had a day that's 2-to-1, if we can start to recognize those positive experiences more, our sense of happiness and wellness grows. So we can practice noticing the positive to help make our brain stickier for the positive. And this tool is one that Dr. Rick Hansen has developed. And it also, I have a note at the bottom that new brain pathways often form along existing ones. So it takes advantage of that piece of scientific knowledge too. So what I'd like you to do right now, in the tool itself, the idea is to notice when you are having a positive experience. So maybe you're having a positive experience right now. Maybe these practices that we've been doing, you have something to connect with right now. And if you don't, you can also call to mind some recent positive experience that you've had. So I've asked you to do that, to notice really notice a positive experience. If you're having a positive experience right now, really acknowledge that. Wow, I'm having a positive experience right now. Or if not, think of a time recently that you could name as a positive experience. And then imagine expanding it. Imagine that experience getting really, 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 really big. Just spreading out and letting it be as large as possible. And giving that expansive feeling a moment to expand the sense of a positive experience, really giving it space. We often have positive, someone mentioned earlier, they never noticed how comfortable their chair felt, right? You don't notice it. It's there, it's comfortable, you're sitting in it all the time, but give it space to feel that comfort. And maybe you can find something in your space that gives you comfort and positivity that you don't really recognize a lot of time, that's just there. So expand it. And then imagine it sinking into yourself, absorbing that positive experience, absorbing it into your bones, having it just really lock into you, soaking it in. And then the final step is, while you're still holding that positive experience, that expanded and absorbed positive experience, bring to mind some area of challenge, some habit you'd like to change, some space where you are not at your best, and hold those two things together. And the idea of this is that it can really start to help you bring you the strengths and the positives that are there as resources to the challenges, to the change that you're trying to make, to the places that you're trying to make change. And it has this handy acronym of HEAL. to remember to have, expand, absorb, and link positive experiences. And then I'm going to hand it over to Chris for the next thing.
While we're transitioning, we had a comment from Leah. Thank you.
Yes.
It should be noted that not
Great.
only, excuse me, not only are you impacting yourself, but by doing these simple things, you're being a positive example for your family, your coworkers, your friends, and clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Leah. And I think in this business of our brain being interconnected, the interactions of our brain, and I have that mentioned a little bit later on too, that when we're looking at individual resilience, which is what today, building our own individual resilience, that is absolutely connected to all, and we have a major impact on others around us. So thank you for that.
Right. Oh, there I am.
I just clicked on it to make sure you were at the right.
All right. So we've talked about some of the benefits of physical activity, and so what I'd like to do is just take a few minutes to brainstorm, because I think that we all have different ways that work for us, and sometimes we think of physical activity as being certain things, and we don't think of easy ways that we can incorporate it every day, or there are just things that we might like to try that we don't know about. And so I'm hoping to have a brainstorming session where if all you do in this couple of minutes is tell us maybe your favorite thing, I'd like to make a list that we can send out to all of you later of things, physical activity that you do that you really enjoy, and it could be by yourself or as a group or with another person, or easy things that you incorporate into your daily routine that you would like to share with others, so that we can have a really good list or a menu of different kinds of things that we can try after today. So one thing that I wanted to mention was in 2011, the American College of Sports Medicine produced a report where they had done a lot of research to find out what kinds of physical activities are helpful and how often adults should do them every week. I provided a link to that article if you want all of that information. It can be a little overwhelming because it seems like a lot. And honestly, if you, some physical activity hits all 4 of these areas, and if you even do any one of them as part of a regular routine, it's good. So with that in mind, and with those categories in mind, to help you get your brain thinking about what kinds of things you like to do or have found it easy to do throughout, or on a regular basis, if you could either say out loud or type into the notes section what kinds of activities those are, and we will send the list out to all of you later. So starting now, let's just do that for a couple of minutes. Barb, if you could read the typed version off, that would be great. And then Becky, would you mind recording?
It actually automatically records.
Oh, that's right.
Notes, so we can, I'll
Perfect.
record anything somebody says out loud.
Okay.
And then we can pull from the notes.
All right. All right, so what kinds of activities do you like to do? What are some ideas you'd like to share with other people?
Biking, gardening, bird watching, walking, anything in nature, just being in a quiet being in the quiet, surrounded by sounds of nature. Saying that I have my window open and I can hear all the birds outside, so that's really kind of cool while we're doing this. Any physical activity during the workday, I take small walks around the building, especially when I'm feeling sleepy or when I feel like snacking, the fresh air and exercise does wonders. Zumba, hiking, swimming, again, walking in nature. Every morning I do Instantly Max 30. I'm not familiar with that. A high intense cardio strength training video. In the evening, we take bike rides as a family. We bike around town. We go to parks. We visit Grandpa at the cemetery. Meditating. Listening to loud music and dancing and singing. Again, Instantly Max 30, high intense 30-minute video. I'm going to have to check that one out. Running, daily push-ups, using stairs instead of the elevator, sitting by the lake, walking the trails, running, stretching, moving every hour when sitting for so long, breathe and rebounding. Watching stand-up comedy and laughing. Fellow coworkers go for walking meetings. Oh, that's interesting. We also have pace time, circuit training for our 15-minute breaks. Walking as a family anywhere, playing baseball. Push-up challenge with coworkers. Noon walks with my dog. Biking to the library.
Those were great examples. And some of the things that I heard, well, for one, Becky talked earlier about social connections, and people mentioned being part of a team, doing things with their family, and so that is a great way to incorporate multiple things at once. You can get some physical activity and have your need for social connections met all in the same activity. Some things that people mentioned, not everybody would normally think of physical activity, gardening, bird watching, stand-up comedy, but they certainly are, and so it's great that people think of ways to move that are less traditional ways of how we think about exercise. Using the stairs instead of the elevator is a really simple thing to do that really doesn't add any extra time. Another one that many of you have probably heard is parking farther away from the entrance when you go to run an errand. Those extra steps that you put in to get into the store add up during the week. I heard a lot of low intensity and high intensity options, which is great. Many of you mentioned doing something with family, but somebody mentioned walking their dog too, and pets really have an impact on our overall wellness. Being in nature was something that I heard a lot, and there's all kinds of evidence out there. And this goes back to the 6 domains of wellness that we talked about early. There is a spiritual quality to connecting with nature, and that's one of the domains of wellness. And in fact, a lot of the things that I heard about physical activity connect to many of the 6 domains of wellness. So thank you for your participation in this activity. And as I said, we'll be sending the information out so that we can all learn from one another about how we can add these kinds of things to our life.
I have to make a correction. Sorry,
Yeah.
Leah. I think I misspoke both times she put it in here. It's Insanity Max 30.
Insanity Max 30. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. I love the list too, and I just last week I just saw a study actually around awe, AWE, the word awe, and they talked about a study where they had a group of students somewhere near like the giant redwoods, I think, look at the redwoods for like 10 minutes or something, and then one group, and then their control group was like looking the other way at like the, I don't know, a shop across the street. Like it was in a place where you could look both at something awe-inspiring and something just sort of industrial. And then they had somebody came along and like dropped a bunch of pencils or pens or something, and they found that the people who had just experienced awe were more helpful than the people who hadn't. And so interesting that how, I don't know, that came up for me around nature, how much, again, how we increase our own wellness, that feeling of awe actually helps us interact positively with others as well. So, great list. All right, so again, I think it was Leah who forecasted this piece of the presentation about our connection with others and the open loop system of the brain, where essentially we talk about the power of connection and support, and that our biology actually attunes to the people we are with, that the amygdala that we talked about earlier in the midbrain acts as a relay station in the emotional loop between people. When we are in sync, limbic resonance, our limbic systems, our limbic states converge. So there's, again, studies around this. And emotions are contagious. We know that, but that's really underlined in science, that even when there's no verbal communication, so whenever we're in a room with people, we have an impact on each other. Studies show that support, actual intentional support, has a positive impact on mental and physical health as well as behavioral change. So, for example, there's studies that where cancer patients, when they have a support group, have more showed greater physical health even by just simply having that support, that impact of support. And we've done a lot of work in connection with the work that Washington State has done, sharing adverse childhood experiences data with communities and help and inspiring communities then to create responses. And one of the things they've found, so Washington State recently in their behavioral risk factor surveillance system, which asks people questions about their adverse childhood experiences and their current health, also ask questions about, do you have support? Are there at least two people? And what they found was that when you have at least two people who can come and help you when in need, that reduces the likelihood of health and social problems that are linked with early experiences in childhood. So some of you may have heard us talk about the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study in other contexts, or have heard it from other people. And some of you may not. But essentially, it's a long-term, over 20 years public health study replicated in many states, including Minnesota, that shows that when you have an adverse experience in childhood, you're much more likely to have a whole host of health and social problems throughout the course of the life. And what Washington State's new data shows is that even if you've had adverse experiences, if you have support, that likelihood of those poor health outcomes reduces. So support is really, really key even in creating an individual wellness for ourselves and others. So we can both look for and cultivate support for ourselves, and we can offer it to others. And so an exercise I'd like to share with this comes from a book called Search Inside Yourself, a book by a Google executive who started studying emotional intelligence and mindfulness. And it's a very accessible book. Chris and I were just talking about it the other day. Some people love it, some people not so much. He uses lots of humor, and so it's super accessible, has lots of great activities and exercise in it. But one is this idea of just like me. And essentially, there's a lot of research out there that shows that when we see ourselves like someone else, we're more likely to have empathy for them and feel that connection and build connection between each other. And so an exercise that we can do, a simple exercise that we can do, one the way Chad Meng, I'm going to say his name wrong. I'm not going to be able to say the name of the author, but it might be on my next slide. Anyway, when he talks about it, he talks about just going throughout your day and having a habit of, when you see somebody, thinking to yourself, just like me, they want to be happy. Just like me, they want to avoid suffering. And doing that, even if you go on a walk, some of you talked about going on a walk, even with the animals that you encounter, if you practice that thought, you can cultivate greater empathy and shift yourself. Well, you know, a lot of times we automatically go to judgment when we see someone doing something we don't like, doing something that can harm or hurt others. And it helps us shift into a place of empathy and compassion and connection by just noticing and thinking just like me. And so even just from checking the time, I'm going to take 1 minute and ask you just to close your eyes if you like, or maybe just have a soft focus in front of you. And bring to mind someone that you care deeply about. And while you're holding their image, just think to yourself, just like me, they want happiness. Just like me, they don't want suffering. They want to be free from suffering. And then may they be well. And then bring to mind someone who's an acquaintance, someone who's more of a neutral person, someone you don't already have a strong connection with. And bring their image to mind. And again think, just like me, they want to be happy. Just like me, they want to be free from suffering. May they be well. And then finally bring to mind someone who you think of as different from yourself, as not like you, or someone you may have a little bit of a challenge with. Someone you have a little harder time feeling that connection and empathy toward. And again think, just like me, they want to be happy. Just like me, they want to be free from suffering. May they be well. And I did not include, so I will add the resource, the connection, the source for this. Again, the book I know is called Search Inside Yourself, and I'll get the author's name and information to add to the slides before we send them out to you for the Just Like Me practice. So we are down to about 6 minutes.
Yeah, I was wondering. I think maybe we can skip the guided meditation. It seems like we just did that.
We've done something. Okay.
So I think we're okay there.
But there are resources here, lots of resources where you can find guided meditations, which is another great way to quiet the mind, and Chris included those. And I will, maybe we'll just touch base on each of these slides momentarily. Another piece of science shows that when we make sense of our own story and create a coherent narrative, that can really, and part of that is understanding how trauma recreates itself and how often people who are hurting people hurt people, as they say, and healing people heal. So helps us shift from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, or what's wrong with me to what happened to me. And the great resource for this, I can't say enough about the book, The Whole Brain Child. Great resource both for nurturing kids and also reflecting on our own, as caregivers, experience as children, and how we might make sense of our own stories so that what we pass on to others, not only for our own health and well-being, but for the health and well-being we share with others. So I think that brings us to the end. So I'd like everybody to take a moment, and we will be sending an evaluation and the PowerPoint, and if anybody needs CEUs, let us know, and we can send those as well, a CEU certificate. But one of the things we'll ask on the evaluation, we'd like to ask now too, if you have an answer for it, is what will you practice? So back to that idea of choosing something for 21 days. I think it's Rick Hansen also has a book called Just One Thing that has suggestions for one thing you can practice. But what's the one thing you're going to, maybe you're already in the midst of practicing something, maybe you're going to pick something new to practice for the next 21 days. I've heard 21 days. I've also heard 6 weeks sometimes. The longer you repeat something, the more it becomes a habit and becomes automatic, and then you can move on to the next thing. So if you would be willing to put any comments. I think our last thing is just our thank you. Any comments you may have, any if you want to share with us what you'll practice, if there's something you would like to offer as an additional practice that isn't here, raise your hand, type it into the text box, let us know.
Before I go to the list, one thing I personally am going to add is the chime on my computer, because I don't always remember to either take that pause or get up and move. and especially rounding my shoulders. One question, if they want the CEUs, who would you
You
ask?
can just reply to the email we'll send later today. That'll probably be the easiest thing.
All right. Lots of comments are coming in. I will definitely use the breathing techniques. I learned them in college, but failed to use them in life.
Me too.
Daily mindfulness, empathy, exercise, and more movement, including physical activities for 15 minutes every day. I will practice focusing on the positive. Continue teaching others how to be mindful. More breaks during the day away from my desk. Setting breathing, clearing mind throughout the day. I like the HEAL, H-E-A-L idea. Pairing a good exercise. I really want to begin a mindful meditation practice, even for 5 minutes a day.
Yep, any amount matters, really. Any amount. Sometimes we set ourselves up, by trying to do too much again. Any amount makes a difference. Wonderful. Well, thank you all. We look forward to your feedback. Please do complete the survey that we send. It helps us know what to offer going forward and how we can adjust and adapt and practice new habits that are helpful to you. If you have any questions, I will leave Chris and my email on the screen there that you can feel free to send us questions if you have them.
I've gotten a few more. I like the Just Like Me activity, and we'll try it. I'll bring these ideas to my Parents Helping Parents support group, reminding that we need to take care of ourselves if we are to take care of our children. Exactly.
That reminds me to say too that this webinar will be archived on our website. There under this, and I think it's the for communities section. I should know where to tell you, but maybe we can send you a link to it in the follow-up. There it is. It'll be archived, and so for those, like you're talking about the Parents Helping Parents support group, if you think others would find it useful to watch it, a recording, probably not today, but I would say by early next week, a recording should be available there that you can watch again. You can share with others to watch. It's just you click on it and watch it. So it won't have. It doesn't have our pictures, unfortunately. We unfortunately can't see Chris demonstrating things on the webinar, on the recording, just so you know that. But I think the descriptions are pretty clear of a lot of what we were doing, and so yeah. Alrighty.
Thank you.
Getting a lot of thank yous. Great job, both of you. Leah, again, I'm sorry, I keep picking on Leah. I'll definitely take more time to do the stretching. I've noticed my posture and back being impacted since starting a desk job.
Mm-hmm.
Many thank yous coming in. Great session.
Great. All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everybody. Pause a lot.
Thank you, Becky.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye-bye.